Hi, curious minds and headline hunters. Welcome to the episode that I have been going nuts all day trying to put together, and finally I just scrapped it all. So I'm just going to give you some dialogue on this case that I found in my hometown of Wichita Falls, Texas. And it is a open and active case that concerns a young lady named Tamara Holcknecht, who was found dead at the age of 22 outside in a stock pond, floating face down in the water that was only 2 feet deep. And the reason why this death is alarming is the victim, in this case Tamara, was not seen, or at least nobody reported seeing her, from February 25th until the day that they found her deceased on March 28th of 2007. And right now, as far as I'm concerned, no one has formally reported seeing her or where account for her time during all those days. What I do know is this, and I'm just going to cut right to the chase. The reason why this death that was deemed an accidental drowning by the medical examiner's office of Tarrant County seems suspicious is the victim, Tamara, was found with livor mortis, also known as lividity, on her back. This means that when she died for 16 to 18 hours at least, she was dead on her back, and the blood, after the heart stopped, pooled to her back and left that stain that does not go away once it's fixed. It's called fixed lividity, and nothing is going to move that stain. This is why when they do autopsies, that is one of the indicators that they use for a proposed time of death. By everything that I have seen, and from medical examiners and coroners that I have viewed online, their YouTube videos, their articles, there is a compelling agreement that when a body is found in a supine position or in the drowning position, that all the blood collects in the limbs, in the fingertips, in the toes, around the knees, around the upper part of the body. It does not go towards the back. This was not disclosed until later to the family when Wichita Falls had received its first ever cold case unit. The lead detective, Detective John Laughlin, shared with the family that he discovered on the autopsy this lividity, and it concerned him. The original toxicology report showed that there was no evidence that she had been on drugs. So what it could be at face value, just looking at the data, is that it seems like a perfectly healthy 22-year-old girl who hadn't been seen for days, or at least no one came forward to say that they saw her, died mysteriously and was found in a pond in order to appear that she had drowned. Now, there were signs of drowning in the autopsy, meaning they did see that the lungs had some congestion and that there was swelling, what you would expect to see in a drowning victim. However, when you go to the full evaluation of an autopsy for a drowning victim, it is that lividity that is the sticking point. It doesn't make sense. And because it doesn't make sense, it should have never been determined to be accidental death by drowning, because it should have been left undetermined for both. Now, the medical examiner's office of Tarrant County has been known to be riddled with scandals up until 2011. And Dr. Nizam Peerwani, he was the chief medical examiner who would have been over the whole medical examiner's office for Tarrant County. Wichita Falls, which is in Wichita County, chose to use this medical examiner for the autopsy, which is within their purview. But they selected a medical examiner who just a year later would be reported to be doing a high volume of autopsies, at least, based on my imperfect memory, at least 3 times the limit of what was recommended. And that would be with an associate that he would have to suspend and eventually fire for being very negligent in his autopsy reporting and the way he processed the autopsy. I have found something very suspicious about the autopsy report itself. I was going to share it with you today, but I don't think I can because I do think I need a little bit more due diligence. But if it turns out to be what I think it could be, it's going to be very alarming. Because Wichita Falls at the time, their police department was understaffed, underfunded, and beginning to see a lot of pressure from the community because of the high crime rate at the time. This kind of investigation could have been prejudiced from the get-go. She was a rolling stone, meaning she went from house to house, friend to friend, to couch surf, if you will, because she was a musician and she was a free spirit. And by all accounts, she was a very lovely, kind, generous, compassionate person. In fact, the last place that she was at, or that she was known to be at, the gentleman that she was helping out with a disability, with running errands, with helping him get stuff for his house, he reported he was reported to be the last person to see her the day that she went missing. And he was very overcome with grief because she was such a good friend and helper to him. In fact, he would die a year later. And I'm sure it was of a broken heart. She was gone from February 25th, and her last known time, February 25th, 2007, and her last known time was 3 p.m. At least that's what the reported time was to the gentleman who she was helping's best memory. He was a 62-year-old disabled man in very ill health, could barely move, and yet somehow they were able to help each other. He would give her a place to stay when she needed it, and she could use his car when she needed it. She, in return, helped him keep his house clean, helped cook for him, stock him up with groceries, and would go run errands, anything he needed. And by all accounts, it was a very healthy, wholesome friendship. She was at his house, and where she would be found was just not very far away from the trailer. So within a month, somehow wearing the same clothes, she was found a month later wearing the same exact clothes when everybody saw her last. And in that short of a distance, nobody had seen her. In fact, when her body was found, it was, while it had been exposed to the elements and it was definitely in the middle of decomposition, and her body had to be identified, or at least her identity had to be confirmed by an x-ray that she took when she was younger for an injury. She wasn't as highly decomposed if she had been there for the whole duration of a month. In fact, because of the way the lividity was set, and because of some of the basic autopsy information I have received, I don't believe that they suspect that she was out there for more than a few days. I will correct that if I am getting it wrong, but for now, based on everything that I've been able to discover online, that is what it seems to be, that she was just out there for no longer than a few days. In fact, it was only 2 feet of shallow water that they would find her in. When they did a search of the area, it seemed to be a little bit too rushed. All they found was one of her moccasins. She was wearing brown moccasins, and they only found one in a very small search area. They found a bottle, and I don't know if the bottle was glass or plastic, but if there was physical evidence or if they had anything noteworthy, I don't find it anywhere. They also collected an artificial leaf. Again, don't know anything about what they may or may not have found on that artificial leaf, and a small, what they suspected could be some skin, a little small, I don't want to say sample, but something like that of skin. Again, nothing was noted on that. What we could, what I could find from that autopsy was what was generally available was that she had nothing in her stomach except for a few particles of food, indicating or suggesting that she had not eaten for a few days, and she had a very minimal limit of ethanol and IPA, indicating that if she had been drinking, you could assume that she wasn't drinking that much, but definitely no residual hard drugs were found in her systems except for ibuprofen. She had a small trace amount of ibuprofen in her toxicology report. So, based on everything, what you could assume is that a perfectly healthy girl somehow managed to die on her back and have her body flip over into a drowning position in a very shallow pond that wasn't very far away from the place she was staying, and nobody had seen her, or at least reported to have seen her within a month's time. At least nowhere that I have seen that anybody has reported to the police that they saw her during that time. The only people that have mentioned that they saw her at any time before, or at least were really close to her disappearance, was her mom, who talked to her on February 25th. They talked to her for some time because her daughter promised her. Tamara said that she would visit her the next day, and I believe her sister also talked to her that day, or her cousin. Another family member definitely did talk to her that day. And then, of course, the elderly man who they called Bert, he saw her that day, and he reported that the last time he saw her was 3 p.m. when she told him that she was going to step out for a few minutes, but she would be right back. She left her cigarettes and her lighter in his house, along with all her other belongings that she had taken with her. And from what he mentioned, it seemed like she was just stepping out to say hi to somebody, either in a car or in one of the nearby trailer houses. But she never came back. And while he found it somewhat curious, he thought that was just her. She had just decided to pop out and was going to stay out longer. But of course, as the days and eventually weeks went by, he did become very concerned because it wasn't like her to leave all her stuff for that long, and he hadn't heard from her. So he was very depressed when he found out, at least, that it seemed like he was the last person to have seen her, or at least the last caring person to have seen her. And then the next time that they would find her, she would be deceased. So that is why this case gets me, because there is so much there. And when I read a lot about the autopsy and how autopsies are conducted on drowning victims, when I saw the report card for that department that was riddled with scandal, the chief medical examiner lying, being caught lying by a judge multiple times. I believe that I want to say it was 51 pages of where she cited him for lying 11 different times in his testimony on a criminal case that had the death penalty on the line. That is just crazy to me. This is the chief medical officer. He had been with that department since 1979. It was his first and only job until he was forced to retire in 2011 because of all the scandal. And here in 2007, the next year, they would report that that department still wanted to do more autopsies, even though, by all accounts, from most of the experts at that time, they were doing way more than the recommended amount of autopsies. In fact, if memory serves me correctly, it was up to 3 times with the staff of only 4, not only for their county, but for external counties, including Wichita County, which is Wichita Falls County, which is where Tamara would have been or was when she passed. And her autopsy it was requested to be conducted by Wichita Falls County or Wichita Falls Police Department to Tarrant County. So they did their county, external counties, and guess what? They also did private autopsy requests, and they also had some federal autopsies that they were requested to perform, and they took them all, and they would have kept taking more, and they were arguing to take more. The following year, this would all come out. So in 2007, with all this kind of rush and activity going on, what were the chances that the coroner was going to care about, or the examiner was going to care about, oh, tiny little waif of a girl from Wichita Falls, Texas, decided to say, hey, you know what? This is what I'm seeing. Okay, so the lividity doesn't make sense, but this looks like a drowning. They found her in a pond. She was probably drinking too much, even though the toxicology report doesn't show that. You know what? I'm just going to sign off on it. She drowned, and that's all there is to it. Moving on. I can so totally see that, especially when I see this article in which I found that the the office had already been cited. Remember, I told you about the associate pathologist who had been discovered in how incorrectly he was doing his autopsy and how flippant he was being with he was just putting faulty things on the autopsy. He was actually just lying on the autopsy. I'll just give it to you straight. Okay, so then the second thing I found out about this gentleman is that there was a car wreck, and the person that was in the car wreck, the gentleman, he he said that he just died by the car accident. However, it was discovered by the funeral home director that he actually had a gunshot in his face. So where they said that it was an accident by he died by an accident by a crash, it obviously was not that because he had a gunshot to his face. So these are the kind of major discrepancies. This is the kind when your chief medical examiner has to retire because of scandal that has been chasing them for years, almost a decade, and that's just based on what they know of from that point on. Then something systemic is wrong. In fact, it would be around 2011 where the Texas, uh, what was it, Public Defenders Association was adamant about having their cases rechecked if their autopsies were performed by that department. I don't know how far that got, but I do know that whatever cases were going up to court were getting scrutinized by the public defenders and the defense attorneys. And then also that they were pushing that their old cases, that those autopsies be rechecked and reviewed. So I don't know where that is on that, but I'm telling you, there is enough question marks for this case, even though it's open and active, to go under a big scrutiny, to go under retesting, and to get some kind of clarity on why there would be lividity on the back when the person is believed or was actually um, it was actually stated by the medical examiner's office that she died by drowning, and they found her in the drowning position. I don't understand that. Most healthy individuals do not just fall into a pond and drown by accident. So even if it was an accident, there's still a lot more determinations to be made. But still, there that autopsy was very basic at most, and when you're dealing with a 22-year-old healthy person, or at least by all accounts healthy, she had no history of substance abuse, she had no history of mental illness, she had no history of anything, any diseases or ailments, anything like that. So why would she just be out in the middle of a field and find herself in a drowning position? I mean, even if she just tripped and hit her head or something, there had to be something more, and yet that was not given. This would be enough for a second, third, fourth major look, but there's more. There's a lot more. And I'm going to present to you in the next episode what the family discovered after the autopsy, some information they were receiving from the community that really makes them believe this was not an accidental drowning. And I'm also going to share it with you because I'm coming at this as a mother. I am putting myself in the mother's position. And if that was my child and nobody was listening to me 18 years later, I'm putting myself in that position. And because I'm putting myself in that position, I want to show you how much this mother still loves her daughter, how much she is advocating for her daughter, because until you can get the sense of that love and loss, you're not going to do very much with this video. And I need you to do a lot with this video because we need to get this story out there. The media spotlight needs to be turned back on it because since 2021, it got a little blip of a mention. And before that, 2019, another blip of a mention. And 2016, a couple of blips of a mention. And it needs a lot more than that. It needs like a Dateline presence. It needs like a crime junkie presence. It needs big lights and eyes on it in order to push the Wichita Falls Police Department and Tarrant County to give this another look and do whatever they can until they can find more information that makes everyone feel more confident that they did the best they could and that she died of accidental drowning and nothing else sinister or nefarious. So thank you for watching this. I really appreciate it. You can see I'm fired up about it. I am not going to let this go. This is the one that I really want to push to the top everywhere, and not just for me, definitely not for me, but for this mom who is still grieving her daughter 18 years later and will be for the rest of her life. But hopefully we can get her more answers, because there could be nothing worse than grieving with very little answers and feeling that nobody cares about you. All right, well, take care of you, take care of each other, and God bless you. And until next time, bye.